My name is Nico Lagan, and I'm too conservative for the conservatives. My co-host Rob Ambrose, not were the political orphans. Tonight on the show, we're joined by our special guest, former conservative MP Rob Enders, host of the Lavigne Show, Jason Lavigne, and the author of Alberta Rising and political advocate for Alberta independence, Nadine Wellwood, to speak about Danielle Smith's MOU and, of course, what happened at the UCP AGM over the weekend. Good evening to you all.
Good evening.
How's it going?
Thanks for having us, Nico.
Hi, guys.
Good to see you again,
Well,
Nadine.
You too, Rob.
Feels like just yesterday you were on the show. It wasn't exactly yesterday, but it was pretty much.
Funny that.
Yeah.
So this weekend was the AGM, probably a special one considering Danielle Smith signing the worthless MOU, but in my opinion, exposing herself and her green values. So let me ask you guys an easy question, since all of you were there over the weekend. How was the atmosphere at the AGM? And I'll start with Rob Enders. Rob Enders.
Sure. Yeah, it was well attended. There were 4,400 voting delegates. It makes it the second biggest political convention in Canadian history, the first biggest being the previous UCP AGM. And that's because you have a lot of Take Back Alberta or Alberta Prosperity Project people coming to these things because they don't trust the politicians and they want to make sure that they're pushing things in the right direction. So that's all good. Policy stuff was good. I have the policy book in front of me over here. There were 36 resolutions or so that were dealt with. A lot of great stuff, making sure that mRNA can't be injected into food, and it's not going to be used on chickens and pigs and beef and that type of thing. Getting rid of fluoridation, which I didn't used to understand was a big issue until I sat across from Dr. Nagase down when Jason and I were down at the courts for Milk River and Coots, and he explained soft metals to me. So it's generally very buoyant. I will say this, in Danielle Smith's speeches, she should have avoided the Captain Canada angle, because I think, like, if Carney wants to beat that drum, that's his job, right? Or Pierre Poilievre even. But those people that were there are cynical. They're bitter about the federal government. They're bitter about the Liberals. They're bitter about the Trudeau legacy and Carney and globalism and all that, and pipeline closures and everything else. So she in her speeches, she did a little bit of, oh, well, we can kind of make this work, and hopefully this is going to be okay, and we can trust him, and whatever. And that got booed. That crowd was not up for hearing anything positive about Mark Carney or the federal Liberals or a plausible pipeline deal. I mean, even Dan McTeague, who is a former Liberal MP, a colleague of mine in the House of Commons, even he said that the devil's in the details of this stuff, and he doesn't trust Carney. And because of the qualifications about Ebbie and about natives in BC, he doesn't think it's going to go through.
So it's safe to say that they didn't appreciate Danielle Smith saying that we should trust Carney during her presser after the MOU signature last week?
Yeah, no, the crowd did not react well to that at all. She got very audibly booed. I grimaced because, she was looking over in my direction, and there were tons of people booing around me, type of thing. And it's something that, as the Premier of Alberta, given the history, given how badly abused we've been by Ottawa, they're tired of that. Like, they don't want to hear about, Carney's a good guy and give him a chance, and the Liberals have turned to into something better. Like, they don't want to hear that. They're tired of that. They're too cynical for that.
So, Rob, when you say Captain Canada, just for those who aren't, familiar with Alberta politics, I assume you mean like sort of like pro-federalist rhetoric, sort of like olive branch talk, that kind of thing.
Yeah, just to paint this out, during the last leadership race for the Federal Conservative Party, Danielle supported Jean Charest. Okay. Now, I think that the number of federal conservatives in Alberta who would have supported Jean Charest for the federal leadership would have been in the single digits as a percentage. It's not broadly representative of the Alberta conservative base at all. So that kind of tells you where she's at. I mean, I remember when she was a campus conservative, years ago, and I was a campus reformer, and she was a charade person. So I know there's history there, personal history. But it's just it doesn't resonate with Albertans right now. They're too bitter. Coming off of Trudeau and the globalism stuff and the lockdowns and the jailing of the pastors and the violations of rights and freedoms and the attacks on oil and gas industry and those, it has a sour taste in their mouth. They're not willing to tolerate it. And so when she played those cards, it did not go well, and I think for good reason.
So she's not reading the room, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, in Alberta, the base of Alberta politics is southern Alberta, south of Calgary, the rural areas. Those areas have generated, whether it was Wild Rose 1.0 or 2.0, whether it was the Social Credit Party, whether it was Reform Party, all of those things were generated. The only exception to that was the Western Canada Concept, which came out of central Alberta. So to be the conservative, de facto real conservative party in the province, you have to hold rural south. And then after that, you have to govern, you have to have Calgary. And so when Wild Rose 1.0 was around, they held the rural south and a good chunk of central Alberta. And the progressive conservatives held Calgary because it's the white collar sector of the oil patch, the geologists, the engineers, the accountants, the executives of the oil companies. And Edmonton is kind of more to the roughneck neck of the woods type of thing for the oil patch, and a lot of government unions and what have you. So that's the magic sauce. And Danielle understands Calgary, but she always had a tough time with the rural folks because they were more socially conservative than she was. And so when you do that, rah Carney on the memorandum of understanding, those people don't respond well to that at all. They don't want to hear that. They don't trust it.
So Nadine, you and I had a 20-minute or so conversation yesterday, so I have an idea of where your mind is, and there's a good reason why I let Rob go first, because I got a feeling you're not quite as optimistic.
Sanguine.
Is that a word I should use? Yeah, I'll use optimistic. What was your take on the atmosphere at the AGM over the weekend?
Well, Rob is saying that people are bitter. I don't think people are bitter. I think they're actually informed. And they are far more educated now, and they are beginning to understand the political maneuvers and the games that are being played at their expense. And so, Danielle, when she came out and made a big rah about the MOU, everybody in that room, now other people, different story, but the people in that room, they have been involved for the last 5 years. This is not the same audience, not the same people who showed up to AGMs 10 years ago, 6 years ago. This is a very different audience, and they are very engaged. So they know very well what is going on. They know the MOU is nothing, and we can break that down here shortly. But the reality is, she at one point came out and said that you're going to have to trust me. And they're asking, an audience who has been betrayed by pretty much every level of government, including Danielle Smith. And, she wants us to trust. And she herself, quoted Ronald Reagan, trust but verify. Well, how much more do you expect people to verify than Mark Carney, who wrote a book called Values, who makes it very clear what his intentions are, and then, had consulted and advised Justin Trudeau for 5 years? The Emergencies Act, this wasn't Justin Trudeau, this was Mark Carney, freezing people's bank accounts, all these COVID measures. He was a part of all of that. So no, there is no trusting here. And this MOU is set up in such a way with the language. Well, just the fact that it's just an MOU in and of itself. I mean, legally, it is non-binding. It means nothing. And then when you dive into the details and the language that's within it, we're expected to follow through on commitments by April 1st and then July 1st. And yet this supposed pipeline, which will change nothing. And the people in the room understand that as well. You know, we want independence. Why? Because independence is the only thing that's going to change Alberta's fate. You know, a new pipeline is not going to do that. And I mean, the way things are written in here with methane and with LNG and with oil and gas and all the conditions that are around it, nothing is going to happen in here for decades. And I mean, at that point, who knows what government's there, who knows? But Danielle Smith will have committed Albertans to a higher cost of living, to an environment that is less attractive for investment. And, you know, it makes no sense whatsoever. And they called her out on it and they nailed it straight on the head. You know, they're informed. They know what they're up against right now. And Danielle Smith tried to pull a fast one on them and got it thrown right back at her.
Yeah, that's the thing that jumped out at me as well when I read the MOU. I went into it. I did a deeper dive today because I knew we would be talking about this tonight. It seems like a lot of the benefits for Alberta are, you know, 3, 4, 5, 6 years down the road, if they come at all, while a lot of the costs are, you know, next month, next year, immediately. One thing that really jumped out was the and whoever is probably familiar with the question could answer this. I'm not sure which one this would go to, but it's about the carbon capture technology pathways. I think the company is called. It says that the pipeline won't start until the first phase of the pathways project is completed. It said they won't. I think the word they used was conditioned upon. So we were talking about this last night. Is this even a viable technology, or is this a pipe dream? And whoever is most familiar with this could answer, because I'm not really sure about it.
Before we do, though, let me ask Jason to provide his opinion on the AGM. Then we can go into a bit more of the MOU. But Jason, you were there. You even had the opportunity to ask Danielle Smith a question. So tell us how you felt about the atmosphere at the AGM. You covered it live for the 3 days. And quick question, were you satisfied with the answer she gave you?
No, I was not satisfied with the answer she gave us. No.
You were waiting for that one? Well played.
No, I was not satisfied with
sir.
the answer she gave me. Representing western west of Edmonton, so I'm part of the Roughnecks, as I was just alluded to here. The people out here are definitely educated. They're frustrated, and this has been for generations. They know what's been going on here. The AGM itself, I went there to gauge what was going on, the temperature, and there was a bit of a mixed temperature. People are absolutely aware that this MOU is a bad idea. They're not happy with it. She definitely got booed on Friday for that one. She also got booed when she said United Canada, like sovereign Alberta within United Canada. She got booed on that as well. And then speaking to a lot of people, I walked away, though, with a little bit more support for Danielle than I was expecting to see there. I thought we were going to walk in there and hear a lot of conversations about replacing her. That wasn't the tone that I found there. There may be in some certain groups that had those kind of conversations, but for the most part, MLAs, members, separatists, not, the tone wasn't about replacing her. They were more like, well, we've got her. Now let's see if we can get her to do what we need to do. So I queued up the question, because my question for her, when we did the little press scrum at the end of her keynote, was about whether or not, if Alberta gave her a new mandate for independence, whether or not she would follow through with it. And I was a little disappointed with the answer, because the answer didn't give me a committal either way. She laid out all the different steps. She called them barriers to get to that point. And she was pretty adamant that she didn't think that it was going to be an easy peasy process at all. And then come back and ask her that question again when she is available. And we get a successful referendum. If you like, it's a 2-minute clip. I do have it queued up if we want to play that.
Go for it. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Play it. I was going to, so go for it.
Jason, did she list herself as one of those obstacles?
I'll let you hear that, and then we'll get right into that right after here. Is it not playing? Okay, 1 second. I'll push another button here. And here we go. Good afternoon, Premier. Jason Lavigne of The Lavigne Show. Nice to see you again. Recently, you had a comment on a press conference about independence where you were asked about independence, and you were very clear that your mandate for your election was a sovereign Alberta within a united Canada. And you said if there was a referendum, a successful referendum, that may provide you with a new mandate. Yesterday, you saw the reception Jeffrey Rath got. Let's say it was warm. And if there was a successful mandate provided to you, would you follow through with an independent mandate?
Well, I think there's a lot before we would ever get to that. I mean, first of all, Thomas Lukasik started a petition campaign. He got 450,000 signatures or so. They're in the process of validating those signatures, so wait to see the outcome of that. That would be one potential referendum question. I know that Jeffrey Rath's group is in court right now to try to get affirmation on their question. I think they're expecting a result on that by the end of the year, so watching for the result of that. And then if they're able to get signatures, it's a significant number, 177,000. And then if putting it to Albertans, they'd have to get a clear majority on a clear question. Like, there's a lot of barriers. So you might have to ask me if any of those milestones get met. But my job has been, I felt all along, is to give Albertans confidence that the country works again, that we can negotiate with the federal government and get an outcome that benefits us and benefits Canada. And I know there's still a little bit of skepticism, evidently, about whether or not I asked the question yesterday. I think we can be confident that the country works better today than it did 2 days ago. Not everyone in that room agreed with me, but I think more did in the room today. And that's my job, is to make sure that the people see that I'm trying, that we're doing whatever we can to be a partner and to meet the federal government partway. But you need a dancing partner, right? They need to meet us partway too. It's pleased to see on this first step that happened, but there's a lot more to go.
So I should have asked her if she'll sign an MOU if we reach those steps, whether or not she would go ahead and represent the new mandate. But in a previous press conference question, she did say if she is voted a new mandate, then she would follow through with it. So if there is a successful referendum where there's Susakic's, which, by the way, breaking news today, it was certified, so his signatures are good. It's going ahead now to the next step. So we may be getting that referendum after all. But if it is a successful one for independence, will she be as strong on that mandate as she's currently on this mandate? And that's yet to be seen.
Because that's an interesting point, because when I watched your video earlier and I listened to some of the videos that came out of the AGM, I listened to the presser after the MOU signature last week. And Rob, I think you're on the same page as me. Like, we're both Easterners, right? We're not from Alberta. We've never lived there. I'm from Quebec. He's from out east. And we identified this as something we need to cover, especially as people from the east, because we knew that what's going on in Alberta would never be covered properly by mainstream media. So we made sure that over the past few months, we are covering it as best as we can. And it was always an assumption from ours that she was always on the side of Alberta, but kind of playing the line between separatist and saying within Canada without really tipping her hand too much. At least she had been quite successful from an outside perspective, like Easterners, to say that, okay, she's playing the line. Okay, she's doing a good job at not really saying what she stands for. But then at the AGM, after the presser, and even in the video with Jason Lavigne there, she's trying to make it clear that she was a federalist all along. Am I missing something here? I don't know which one of you want to answer that question first, but well, I feel after last week, we were lied to. This is how I see it. We were played, and she exposed herself. Am I the one that's on crack here? Or is she kind of flipping the table?
Well, for our friends in Quebec, and I'm sure that you have a good number of people who follow you from there, this would be like a Quebec Liberal premier who realizes that the sovereigntist movement is very strong and plays to it to some extent, to want to get more federal powers wrested from Ottawa for Quebec City, etc., but without actually, going the full mile, as it were, like a Parizeau, for example. So I think I think Danielle at her core is a federalist, and is that's where her heart is, and she's being asked to lead a parade that is not quite where she is. When she was leader of Wild Rose, they wanted her to be very socially conservative, but that's not really who she is. So she was, she was trying to navigate that, and this is what she's trying to do here. I think, there's certain aspects of this that obviously upset people. I think Nadine stated a lot of that very well. Like my board in Calgary West historically always had about half of the people on my board were oil and gas people, whether they were engineers or accountants or geologists or petroleum landmen or whatever. So it's a big deal, and those people at that convention, like Nadine said, normally in years past, 10 years, 20 years ago, there would have been about 1,000 attendees, but now you're talking 4,000 or 5,000 people, and that's an extra 3,000 to 4,000, grassroots, freedom-loving, people who are showing up at these meetings because they don't trust what happened in the past, and so they're pissed. They don't want to do a net zero 2050 or 2035 or 2100. They don't care. And they don't want higher carbon taxes. So that's stuff about kind of trusting Carney and going along with carbon capture, and that doesn't resonate with that crowd.
Your impression, Nadine?
Rob, I've already said that this crowd is educated and it's informed, and they are not going to succumb to the political theater that once, really, I think, blindsided a lot of people. They just know too much now. And when you understand what the MOU is, it is truly nothing. There is no commitment in here. However, Alberta has to take the first steps in order to see in good faith any of the remaining parts of this MOU become reality. And that means we are committing to higher costs of fuel, higher costs for electricity, higher costs for groceries, higher costs for our manufacturing. The reality is a 600 times increase in an industrial carbon tax means that is going to get flowed through to the consumer. And, Carney is up there on his soapbox talking about affordability. What is this going to do for affordability? When I make $100,000, when you get a 37% increase in carbon tax at one producer, now maybe that producer touches 3 or 4 other businesses along the way. It's going to be much higher than that by the time it gets to the consumer. And then the reality is the middle class, your rural communities are the one who are going to be hit the hardest, because if they're making $50,000, that's a much higher percentage of their gross income than a higher net worth individual. So, this is really punishing. And Danielle Smith has signed up to this. She has said this is perfectly okay. And knowing, she has to know, otherwise she shouldn't be in the position she's in, that this is going to hurt rural Albertans. It's going to hurt lower and middle income Albertans. And those were the people who were in the room. To Rob's point, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, it was a lot of businessmen in the room. A lot of people who had an interest in policy, but for the most part, Albertans were busy living their lives. Let the politicians deal with the politics. That is not the case any longer, and they are well aware of what's going on, and they know this is going to hurt them and their pocketbooks. And look at our industries. Carney says we're trying to attract businesses to Canada. How are you going to attract business to Canada? By creating more regulation and creating more expense and cost, to the businesses that we, especially here in Alberta, and he knows this is going to hurt Alberta definitely more than any other province in Canada.
But the question I had for you, Nadine, though, is do you think that we were lied to? Because there was a perception from the East, and again, we're not from Alberta, Rob and I, but we've always agreed that she walked the line pretty well. And I was a supporter of Danielle Smith until that MOU last week. Now my opinion has been made. She's part of the problem. She's on Team Carney's green agenda. But
Nico,
were we lied to? Were we lied to? Was she a federalist all along and we got played?
You know something? She has never lied about that. She has always said she is a federalist. I went to a premier's dinner, sat 10 feet away from her. She was asked the question point blank about separatists in independent Alberta. And her response was, I will go along with what Albertans want. It was none of that. It is my job to make sure you do not get there. How much more self-evident, how much more of a proclamation, a declaration does Danielle Smith have to make, and how many times before people actually start taking her for her word? She wants a united Canada, a sovereign Alberta within a united Canada. Her job is to make sure we do not get to a referendum. And the Referendum Act and the Citizens Initiative Act should be proof enough to every Albertan that that is indeed the case. There are obstacles in that act, both of them, that ensure that Alberta could never become independent, because it ties us the question to having to adhere to the Constitution, sections 1 through 35.1. The only reason the question that the Alberta Prosperity Project is in the courts today is because of legislation put there by the province. Danielle Smith and the UCP government has nothing to do with the federal government.
I want to jump
Anything
into
to-
that if I may.
Can you
and
let Jason unless Jason, you want to answer
report.
this, or you want to let Rob go? Because politicians are just going to hug the whole show, so we got to be careful to keep them on their toes, right?
Hey!
Well, I will touch on it, because what Nadine's referring to is Section 2.4 of the Citizens Initiative Act, which says the question cannot contravene the Constitution. Bruce Party has been very vocal about this, and Nadine's correct. This is a question that's currently in front of the courts, and it was a self-imposed penalty or hurdle by the Alberta government. This has nothing to do with the federal government at all. In fact, it opened up a can of worms with the Indigenous people, First Nations, to go ahead and see this as an opportunity to go ahead and block the question completely. This is why they became interveners on the court matter itself. And it was just 2 weeks ago or a week ago where the closing arguments happened in the court, and we should be expecting a decision at the end of the December, so this month now. I do want to say, though, I pulled Mickey Emery aside, Minister of Justice and the Attorney General of Alberta. I pulled him aside at the AGM to talk to him specifically about this one. And I asked him if it would be possible to go ahead and revoke it. He was actually a little bit optimistic, a little bit more optimistic than Nadine is on this one, that is actually going to pass the court, and the court is actually going to approve the question. The way he saw it was going to allow First Nations to kind of have their say. And then if it comes back as a yes, we'll be on to the next step. But he seemed optimistic that the court was going to go ahead and pass that one. I don't know if he knows anything that is in public, but he didn't say we'll take out the clause, we will revoke it. He said we won't need to. The courts, it looks like the courts are going to go ahead and move ahead with it. So we'll see about that. And before I throw it to Rob, the Tory Blue here, I do think that if it does come back as a go ahead with the question, that's going to add a lot of steam to the independence movement, because it really is going to pause any argument with First Nations, because that's basically the whole question in front of the court right now. Does First Nations, are their treaties going to be impacted by this? Is this considered is this going to contravene the Constitution? And if the answer is no, that's going to, I think, open the door wide open for the conversation to continue and move to the next stage, which is how do you get everybody else in the cities on board with this now that the First Nations issue is out of the way?
Well, one of the interesting things, though, when you listen to Mark Carney speak, he's talking about in this MOU, you must consult, you must consult, you must consult. Consult now has come to mean consent. And there's a big difference between consulting and consenting. And they're not going to consent to this. And Jason was speaking to Minister Avery. I happened to walk by and politely.
It was amazing, Nadine. You grabbed him by the kahunas.
And to his point, he said, well, at the end of the day, the question from the courts is going to end up back on his desk. So that will be very interesting to see what does happen there, whether they allow the question. But I honestly believe that they are going to try to alter the question. I think they're going to uphold the fact that it cannot contravene sections 1 through 35.1. And when you read this MOU, every piece of language in here, it's about honoring treaties and honoring the Constitution. And it puts Alberta out front to have to commit to do things first. So I'm not, and that is why I'm not optimistic. When we had the conversation with Minister Avery, he said, Nadine, obviously, you thought we had nothing last week. You think we have nothing this week. Just don't say anything. And I said, well, I can't do that. I said, because what you guys have done is you thought that you could pull a fast one on this audience and come out and say, what a great win this was. And if you look at social media today, you got people out there talking about all the great things that Danielle Smith is doing and how wonderful this MOU is. And this MOU has committed Alberta to doing something, but no commitment on behalf of Canada to do anything. And we're going to get into pathways, because pathways are the 5 big oil and gas producers. What about the little junior producers that are out there? This 600% industrial pricing is going to kill them.
Now, Mickey Amory,
Mr.
he did look up
Anders.
to. One second, let's throw one little comment in there, because I witnessed this. It was amazing. Mickey Amory, he looked up to Nadine and said, well, we're better off than we were 2 days ago, don't you think? And she said, absolutely not. You're actually trying to trick people and make them believe we're better off than we were 2 days ago. And he really couldn't come back to that comment. He kind of just moved on a little bit, but I think he took it to heart there, Nadine. And maybe he'll take you up on that offer and come onto your podcast and talk to you about it.
I hope he
Nadine,
does.
virtual high five to you. Virtual
There
It
you
was
go.
impressive to watch. I watched, I've seen bulls get castrated, and there was less pain involved in this one.
Mr. Anders, yeah.
To go
ahead,
back
Mr.
to that,
Anders.
whether you consult or consent, Ebby has 60% of his NDP supporters in British Columbia are anti-pipeline. And he's already fundraising with his base, calling this thing a pipe dream. So he's coming out against it, and he's using it as a rallying cry to raise money for his next election. So, whether Carney or Danielle Smith come out saying, well, maybe we're going to work with Ebby to try to get this thing through. Ebby's membership and his fundraising has already indicated he's clearly against it. So I don't think there's much traction there. And I think a lot of this, therefore, is just window dressing to try to make it look as though, Carney and Danielle Smith are doing something about it. Just to explain the history on this, when Jason Kenney was punted to the curb because of jailing pastors and lockdowns and mandates and, all that stuff that was sad and bad about the globalist agenda type of thing with regard to COVID. What happened was you had David Parker with Take Back Alberta, who had mobilized a lot of people to be supportive of the truckers and pastors, et cetera, and the guys who were arrested down in Milk River and Coots and got their stuff vandalized and whatever. And then it's morphed into as well Alberta Prosperity Project with Mitch Sylvester. And when that leadership race happened to replace Jason Kenney, Danielle stepped in and courted those guys and said, "I'm your girl. Like I'll deliver on an Alberta pension plan, and I'll deliver on employment insurance for the province that's run by us, and our own revenue collection thing like Quebec has, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera." And that's not happening. So these people are upset. She signed up to be their champion, and now these people are upset when they see this window dressing that's being done. And I hope actually we see a citizens initiative to have the CRA replaced by an Alberta Revenue Agency.
Rob Ambrose, I know you have a question. Go for it, brother.
Yeah, I got a couple questions, and before I do, guys in the audience, I've seen a few comments saying that my mic was shit in the bed. So just let me know if it's still bad, and I got a backup I can throw on. But until then, I have 2 questions, and this is whoever wants to grab it. First, I guess Nadine, this would be you because you mentioned the MOU. Do you think that the general vibe at the AGM was such that they're opposed to the MOU just because they believe that it's not going to happen, but if it did, they would be happy? Or is it more just that they're just done with that? This is just not a solution that they even give a shit about anymore? And the second one, and I'll throw it to you guys, because this one's brief, is do you think she was surprised by the response she got at the UCP, or do you think she was expecting this?
No,
Or
she
sorry,
was
at the
absolutely
AGM.
surprised. Yeah, she was surprised, I think, by the response she got. I don't think she was expecting that at all. And the reality is the MOU is twofold on that answer. People don't want the MOU because they know and they understand legally that it means absolutely nothing. But people are done with Canada. They're done with the Trudeau Liberals and Mark Carney. It's all one in the same. And so they know that another pipeline is not going to change our fate here. Danielle, to Jason's point, to Rob's point, you know, she was the champion of the people who she was going to enact the fair deal panel, you know, those suggestions. And that's what she ran her entire campaign on. And now she's just sidestepping it, riding the fence, you know, and the one thing I really got annoyed with at the UCP AGM is, again, we're talking about, oh, the NDP is going to sneak up the middle. We have to stay united. And I'm going, well, then Danielle Smith has got a very, very big decision to make here right now. She's going to have to make a decision as to whether or not she wants to be that champion, or she may very well find herself having to step aside and let somebody else do it. Jeffrey Rath made it very clear, like they are not playing games here. And, you know, yes, they are still hopeful that Danielle Smith can be their girl, but Alberta independence is the goal. That is the objective. So I had a conversation briefly with Jeffrey. I know that might shock some of you, but the reality is he looked me in the face and I said, what about the UCP after this weekend? He said, the UCP is an Alberta independence party.
I'll answer the question as well, because you said, so there were three components there, I thought. One was the conditions that are part of the memorandum of understanding, and the conditions suck because the conditions are about net zero 2050 and about carbon price increases and capture. And so some of the conditions suck. Number two, even with sucky conditions, if people don't think it's even going to happen, because even with the sucky conditions, because they're not optimistic. They know that Ebby's against it. They know there's going to be these other roadblocks, etc. We've seen this before. You know, we've done this before. We got the T-shirt. We know what this looks like. And so there's that. I agree with Nadine. I think she was surprised. Shockingly, I think. You know, I'm always astounded that, you know, I remember one time when she got the leadership, she said that, you know, she would run in a sense to the right to get the leadership, but that if she needed to during the general election, she could run to the center, and if she lost seats in rural Alberta, she could pick them up in Edmonton. That doesn't happen. That is not the way this province works. You know, Jason Kenney didn't win Edmonton. Don Getty didn't win Edmonton. Even Ralph Klein had a tough time in his first go, and slowly but surely was able to chip away at that through subsequent elections, being Ralph. So I think that I think the way this is going to play out is people want to make sure that Nenshi does not do well in the next election. So Danielle, I think, will survive past that. But I agree with Nadine. She has to make a decision about whether or not she wants to lead this parade that's being put before her. I don't think she does want to lead that parade. And so I think after that next election is done, there's going to be a movement to say you're either going to lead that parade or you got to get out of the way.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'm just going to tack a couple of things onto here, if you don't mind, Nico. Because it's not so much the MOU that people were truly upset about. It was what we were not talking about, because the MOU certainly was center stage and they were talking about it, but that's not what people want to talk about. They want to talk about independence and to have that conversation. Prior to the AGM, that was going to be one of the topics. Mitch Sylvester was actually asked to come and speak and do a bit of a debate on it, and then basically at the last minute that got canceled and taken off the agenda. And a lot of people are really upset with that. They don't even want to talk about MOU anymore. They don't want to talk about the next panel. They don't want to even talk about the firewall. They want to talk about independence. They're at that stage now. And if you don't mind, I'll throw on the Jeffrey Rath moment on Friday, which caused a lot of people to understand fully what they wanted to talk about that wasn't actually there. Let me just pull this up here, because I think it's important for your audience to understand where is Alberta's head on this issue right now, and why wasn't it talked about. And you'll see what they did when he went ahead and brought it up.
Hello, my name is Jeffrey Rath. I'm from football. I'm for everybody in this room. was signed yesterday, the ink wasn't dry on the paper, and Mark Carney went out and gleefully announced a 600% increase to the industrial carbon tax in Alberta. Now, my question for the room is, how many of all of us favor a free and independent Alberta?
Funny, I don't hear any boos.
Nope.
Yeah, that's
The
pretty
motion
clear.
is passed, as they would say during the policy debates.
So what's important to notice there is they cut his mic, and that absolutely upset a whole bunch of people too. What you couldn't really see in that video, but you can hear it, was that applause was by far the loudest applause for the entire weekend. That includes Danielle coming out each time for her keynotes and stuff. And the media pit where I was, the media stood up on their chairs to capture pictures of the crowd because everybody was standing in ovation. And yeah, she cut, or not she specifically, but the question was cut short. They cut off his mic at one point, and we didn't get to hear the rest of that. But that was the highlight of the whole Friday for sure. And then that was the talk of the entire convention after that. Was this is what Albertans in the UCP party want to talk about: independence. And absolutely, I think there's a lot of support, a lot stronger than they realized. In my understanding, and Rob was there, the cabinet was shocked when they heard that response. They must be in a bubble because they didn't realize how strong it was. And Danielle, I can tell you, wasn't pleased that happened because there was a conversation later that evening about it as well. So, yeah, maybe they're in a bubble. Maybe they think Albertans want to stay in Canada, but that crowd most certainly did not.
Yeah, I think they are in a bubble. You know what happened was Jason Kenney handpicked his caucus, and you know he got rid of a lot of people who were grassroots, you know, conservatives like the Rick Strankmans who fought for ending the Canada Wheat Board and monopoly against farmers. You know, the Derek Fildebrandts who now head up Western Standard, you know, etc. Like there were a lot of Eva Kiriakos got thrown under the bus. Some Kalen Ford. There were a lot of good, solid people that were either shown the door or not allowed to run, and so that's what Kenney set up. Danielle coming in after him in this last election had the ability to get rid of some of the Sky Palace people, you know, that brought in those restrictions and were hypocritical about it, et cetera, et cetera. She didn't really clean house. The electorate did that for her. In the polling that I did 2 months before the election, I had her winning by 3 seats over the NDP. Sorry, one. She wound up winning by 3. I was right in all of my calls, except for 2, which is one of the seats in Lethbridge and the seat in Calgary Northwest, which is where Sonia Savage was as the energy minister and didn't run again. And then they had Rajan Sani jump in. So she was able to wash the smell of Kenney off her between when I took the polling 2 months out and when the election happened. But I think some of those people are still in a bubble. Yeah.
Yeah. It showed on their faces.
So I've been extremely vocal about this over the past week, ever since the MOU. Like I've been talking about this on all my social, how this whole MOU is, sure, it's non-binding, but at the end of the day, Danielle Smith exposed what she believes in. Like she exposed that she is ready to back a green agenda, the 2050 net zero emission. That's what the MOU is all about. It's about putting together a provincial carbon tax that will be at $130 a ton compared to the $80 that the federal is at right now, and it would fall under the tier system that would bring it to $170 by the end of 2030. So you're talking about a 39 cents per liter increase to just produce, and that's on top of the carbon capture that's estimated to add another 5 or 6 cents a liter, making it impossible for Albertan oil to compete on the world stage. So the question I have for you guys, because I've been talking about this like I was a really pissed off Albertan, and I'm just an educated Quebecois from Montreal that just cannot believe that Albertans are still defending Danielle Smith. Because one comment that I keep on getting is that she's playing 5D chess. She only signed that MOU in order to expose Carney and to show how idiotic his green agenda is. So the question I have for you guys, am I the one that's that's smoking something, or people don't want to admit that they got played by Danielle
Danielle
Smith? Like, what's
has-
really going on here?
Danielle has people in social media that are out there beating her drum. And right now they're in damage control. And so anybody who believes what you just said, they are delusional or absolutely just being completely 100% dishonest. Danielle has always supported the green agenda. She's always said it wouldn't be 2030, we'd work towards it to 2050. She's never, ever backed down on any of that. And the last UCP AGM, that was a huge, huge issue with the people in the audience. They wanted nothing to do with this clean climate change narrative. And so, you know, for her to continue on with that, like I said, I honestly think so. Danielle is very, very crafty. She's very articulate. She is very likable. She brings you in, makes you feel important, makes you feel special. You know, now she's going on to some people's shows that she might not normally have gone on before. And giving you like this audience with her, like, you know, you're a somebody. And, you know, nobody wants to be played for a fool. Right. So I think sometimes the truth is harder to accept than the lie. But I think right now people just do not want to accept reality. And the reality is Danielle Smith is not about Alberta independence. She is definitely on the green agenda. And you know, she keeps talking about putting Albertans first. It's a lot of talk. The actions just do not back up the promises.
And
like
I'm gonna,
Jace?
yeah, go ahead, Rob. Sorry.
I was going to chime in to say, yeah, she's articulate, she's policy wonky, she's well read, she understands the patch better than Ed Stelmach did, because wow, that guy destroyed himself by rewriting the royalty rules. Ed was, you know, somebody who came from rural Alberta, and a lot of farmers, ranchers were pissy about these petroleum landmen coming in and cutting deals, and farmers not getting what they thought was a fair share. And so Ed went ahead and penalized them and hit their rice bowls pretty hard. And then all of a sudden, all these oil patch guys, you know, and they take a 30% haircut on a $10 million company, they'll stroke a $50,000 check for the Wild Rose Party, no problem. And so Ed killed himself over that. And so Danielle's savvier than Ed, but she fundamentally is a federalist, and she's got a party that is more and more saying, we want a firewalled, independent Alberta. We want to collect our own taxes. We want to run our own pension. We want to do our own EI. We don't trust the federal government. We want our own environmental regulations. We want to elect our own judges. You know, we want our own firearms laws, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And she's having a tough time swallowing that. And it's interesting that both her cabinet and her are shocked and surprised, tone deaf to that stuff going on. It always blows me away when they don't realize where the people are at on this stuff. Thank God they attend these conventions and get to hear the debates and the policy resolutions that come up. I hope it plugs them in.
Yeah, and if we want to kind of look at whether or not she's playing 4 or 5D chess, Nico, I've been trying to noodle this one a lot. There's some conversations I've had in private, and basically her history ever since university, I've been taking a look at it. She may have an ambition to become prime minister, and if she's looking to be prime minister, one of the ways to do that is to go ahead and try and capture the Toronto, Ottawa Valley, and part of that would be cleaner energy or the green agenda. She might be playing everybody on this one to go ahead and set herself up for that. The reason why I'm going to throw this out there is Poilievre is basically throwing her under the bus. So, like during the Parliament question that he teed up for Carney, basically went after Danielle, calling this MOU a nothing burger. No, it was worthless. It meant nothing. And Pierre's correct on that. And these two used to be chums, Danielle and Pierre. So there seems to be some maneuvering going on there. And if Pierre doesn't survive his leadership review early 2026, she might make a stand and go ahead and try and take that position. But she could only do that if she keeps Alberta in Canada because that's what she would run on. She would be talking to the whole East, like, look what I did. I was able to keep Alberta in Canada. We're going to do carbon capture. We're bringing back, or we're started already bringing back carbon tax. And they'll like that. I think they might like that a lot, and see her as an opposition to Carney that Pierre isn't. Because I think we all could agree right now, politically, Danielle Smith is Mark Carney's largest opposition, even on the national stage, even though she's just focused on, or supposed to be focused on Alberta. So if she was to come out of Alberta, go to the federal Conservatives and become their leader, she could be positioned to become the prime minister, and that might be where her ambitions are. I can't confirm that. But some of her answers to me recently, and I am one of those shows that she came on to have conversations, but some of those answers she gave me was, it's her job to make us understand in Alberta that Canada can work for us. We just have to make our way there through negotiation and getting a dancing partner, as she put it.
We already had a Western prime minister. His name was Stephen Harper. I don't know what she thinks she can accomplish that he couldn't. So, the reality for me, whether you want a 51st state, whether you want an independent Alberta, or whether you want just better terms and conditions, within Canada, you have to have that referendum. You have to get to yes on that referendum. Alberta has no political leverage there. And you saw this with this MOU. This was Carney saying, hey, there's something in this for me. I got no problem signing up to this. I'm going to get a carbon industrial price increase. And yet Alberta's going to pay the price. And I've got no commitment to do anything here for a decade or more. So there was no risk for Canada to sign this, and it's to Alberta's detriment to do so. And this was Danielle's way politically of coming out to say, hey, look, we've met some of these conditions. This is what she thought. She thought people were ignorant enough to not understand what the MOU actually was. Nothing. And, now Carney gets to point the finger at EB and all the Indigenous people going, hey, I tried, we can't force them to do something. Smith gets to go, well, I accomplished, and she needed something before this AGM. Let's be honest. She had to have something because otherwise that was going to be on the first list of discussions. And this was what she thought, hey, look, we got something, make this problem go away. This is all political theater. That's all it is.
Yeah, for this to have any teeth, Robert, 1 second. For this to have any teeth, if BC signed on to the MOU, that would have been impressive. And if there was no, like right now, we don't even get a major project on a major project list. What we get, if we keep up our end as Alberta, is we get the opportunity to put a proposal in, which means there's no guarantee that it's even going to be accepted. So if this MOU said, here's BC, they're signing as well, here are the conditions they're looking for, here's what they'll give up for it. And we also had a commitment, let's say, once the carbon tax went in place, then your proposal can go in, we'll start looking at it on a major project level, then maybe there would have been some more meat. But I think Nadine's absolutely correct. She went in there with whatever she could get because she actually wanted to cause this convention to be about something other than independence. She was basically, this is her Hail Mary to keep that conversation off the topic. Because if that MOU didn't happen, it would have been really awkward in that room. What would we talk about? The big elephant that nobody wants to talk about was all that was on the table. This MOU was a good magician's trick. Sleight of hand, keep you kind of focused in one area. At least they tried, the smoke and mirrors. I don't think it succeeded, though. And I think Rob might concur with that. I think people there wanted to talk about independence. They want to keep pushing it. And they want to get to that question as soon as possible.
Yeah, Jason Kenney made the mistake of keeping his eye on Ottawa and thinking that he was going to run for the prime ministership. Jim Prentice did the same thing. And when you're premier of Alberta, people want you to be the captain of Alberta and the captain of that ship. They don't want you eyeing, a position moving back to Ottawa, etc. That's a mistake. I would say that, during this whole globalist, pandemic stuff, there were a couple things that were the saviors of some jurisdictions and maybe the world. One was grassroots bottom-up democracy that thwarted the elites, in some of their attempts, etc. Whether that be the trucker convoy, et cetera, et cetera. You also had jurisdictions that have federalism, like India, where Uttar Pradesh said, we're not going to buy, expensive injections. Instead, we're going to use hydroxychloroquine, et cetera. And that's 200 million people, 2/3 the size of the United States. Thank God for, the governor of Florida, DeSantis, and for Kristi Noem in South Dakota, who did things differently and gave an example to the rest of the country and the world on how things could be done differently. Same goes for Alberta. Not giving credit to Jason Kenney here, but to MLAs who spoke out against some of this stuff, like the Shane Getsons or the Drew Barneses and the trucker convoy people down in Milk River and Coots. And so those are things that have to be embraced. And I would say going forward, if we realize the status quo is not working in this country, and I would argue that it is not, then Alberta and Quebec need to set the tone for what a rejigged federalism, looks like, right? And that means, for example, that Ottawa is not in charge of taxes and not in charge of healthcare and not in charge of a whole bunch of things. That Alberta takes back everything that Quebec's got, plus election of judges, plus pipelines, environmental regulation, gun legislation, etc. And then at that stage, I don't have to worry about draconian initiatives coming out of Ottawa. And I think that type of example sets the bar not only for Canada, not just for Alberta, maybe North America and the world.
Well, Nico, you had
think
asked
Alberta
me,
wants equalization payments too, like Quebec? I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
well, Nico, you had asked me last week whether or not I thought the MOU was political suicide, and I said no, I don't really think
Yep.
so. I said I don't think it's enough to push people over the edge on Danielle Smith. I said, but remember when Jason Kenney had that moment, Rob, when he said, maybe we need a new base. I need a new base. When Danielle turned the mic off on Jeffrey Rath, after everybody in that room standing on their feet, applauding, like you said, the loudest cheer, I honestly went, here is Danielle Smith's moment of, I need a new base.
So, the thing I keep on hearing from the AGM, and it seems from the average Albertan, is that they're very politically informed compared to the rest of the country. And the only thing, though, I'm hearing from the AGM, if I look at mainstream media and even the air quote conservative content creators out there, is that she's going to bring Castle law, she's going to bring Castle doctrine to Alberta, and that she will prevent the gun grab by the Liberal government. Is that enough for the people in Alberta that voted for Danielle Smith to forget the MOU, to forget what it means, even though it's not legally binding? Or is it enough for them to forget about the independence question? Because that's all I'm seeing on social media right now, and it doesn't matter that it's X, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. They're all talking about Castle law. They're all talking about no liberal gun grab in Alberta, and I seem to be the only moron still bashing about the MOU. And I'm not even from Alberta.
Here's the reality, though. Danielle Smith has not committed to Castle law. Nowhere has she said that. Not once. She's come out with some strong language and said you don't want to get shot, you don't want to get beat up, don't break into somebody's home, which means you have a right to defend yourself, to defend your property, to defend your family, sure. But what she said is that she is not going to allow, or she's not going to order the RCMP to confiscate guns. She said she is not going to let the courts. So if it goes to court, she's going to say we're not going to prosecute, right? Because they have some influence over the courts. That's all she said. That is not legislation that cut and dry says that Albertans have property right and the right to defend themselves through Castle law. So the people, again, that are out there promoting this, they are promoting misinformation. They are so blinded by, a few gestures. And I mean, you have to remember, the federal government still has jurisdiction when it comes to guns in this country, right? It's a mix. Right?
I want to wade in on that.
Right?
And
so,
I'll be right after Rob too.
Right? So the thing is like, her strong language, people are inferring what they're hearing to what they want, but it's not reality, I guess is my point. She has never said she will be implementing Castle law.
So I've been on the inside of some of the gun discussions because I'm involved with the Firearms Institute for Rational Education here in Alberta. And so we had a number of people, whether it was Jeff Rath or Mitch Sylvester and other people, me included, who said that we should have provincial licensing rather than federal licensing. And you say, well, how does that work? Okay, well, the criminal code is federal, okay, but licensing for firearms, when it first happened, back in, I think it was 1911 was the first time that happened, was actually done by provinces. It wasn't done by the federal government. Why? Because in the British North America Act, now the Constitution Act, okay, private property is something that's regulated by the province, not the federal government. So if you have your license for a motor vehicle, that's a provincial thing. It's not a federal thing. And so the first provinces that brought in licenses with regard to handguns, say, for example, Ontario, and then followed by, British Columbia and Manitoba, okay, that was a provincial license. It was not a federal license. And what happened was people were so upset by the gun regulations that came in under Arthur Meehan after the First World War was over and the Winnipeg General Strike, because the communists were agitating. He brought in some federal gun some federal gun laws, and what happened was the West, Alberta and Saskatchewan, rebelled against it, and they had banners basically saying "Britain shall not be slaves," which is right out of the "God Save the Queen," etc., the anthem. And so that meant that the progressives started under Carrar and collapsed the Borden government. So this issue is yet again rearing its head 100 years later, where the West particularly says, to hell with your gun laws, you're not going to grab our guns. And and by the way, so there were those of us who advocated for this idea of a provincial license, because if the feds try to screw with it and grab a bunch of guns, then we say, well, let's set up a competing provincial license. And unfortunately, Danielle and people in the provincial government didn't want to go with that. And we had a lot of support amongst gun owners in Alberta for that type of initiative. And so I know that this jurisdiction is better than most in this country with this issue, but once again, it was a missed opportunity. And if we get some legislation with regard to this, the ministers have said it's probably not going to come up this spring. It might come up in the fall next year of 2026, which means that it's going to be a tight timeline with regard to how that works in terms of the federal stuff. So it's another thing that kind of gets under people's skin.
And to kind of dovetail on what Nadine was saying there, actually, it's a little bit worse than she was implying there. The provincial government cannot direct the courts or the judges to do anything, or the Crown's office. All they can do legally is provide recommendations. They can't provide directions. It's against the law. The criminal code is federal, so that means she can't change the criminal code and say Castle Doctrine is allowed in Alberta. That's not the power she has. She doesn't have that jurisdiction. The best she can do is just say to the Crown's office, we recommend that we do not prosecute these. The final decision is still with the Crown. It's not with the government, and we have that separation of power on purpose. Can you imagine the NDP government being in there telling you to prosecute all these people, all these other things that are not in the criminal code? That would be crazy. We don't actually have that ability. So the best she can do is just provide a recommendation through her Attorney General to the Crown's office. They don't have to follow it. They could go ahead and prosecute.
Really important to note there that our courts, the majority of which would be hearing these cases, those judges are appointed from the federal level. So
correct.
That's a really, really, really important point for people to understand. These are not Albertans sitting on Alberta's courts making decisions as Albertans. These are judges that have been appointed by federal liberal-minded governments that basically they are going to enforce their rules, not Alberta's.
That's
correct.
True. That's one of the reasons people support the idea of election of judges. But the other thing is, John Horgan, when he was premier in BC for the NDP, that's one of the things he instructed the Crown prosecutors was not to prosecute for small amounts of marijuana, say, for example. So he was pushing the envelope there in terms of how the federal law would be enforced in British Columbia. And Danielle could try to do something like that here in Alberta, but I wish she was more determined about that when it came to guns.
Correct. And she learned that lesson when she was trying to just even have a conversation with Pastor Arthur Pulowski in his matter. She can't interfere with the courts at all. She got herself in trouble. She understands that there is a separation there. And yes, of course, with federally appointed judges, at the end of the day, they will report to Ottawa, their Federation of Judges, and they'll take the direction from there. They won't take it from the provincial government.
Rob, anything you wanted to ask before we let our guests go?
No,
I did want to answer Rob's earlier
the
question.
sponsor. Oh yeah, absolutely. Please do.
Yeah, because Rob's earlier question was carbon capture. That kind of slipped as we moved on to
That's true.
topics.
That's true.
Because he asked if anybody knows anything about carbon capture. Well, the answer is yes. So let me just jump onto that quickly for you, Rob. I don't want to forget your question. Saskatchewan has been playing around with this for a while. So has Alberta, and it's a failure. It's an actual failure. So what we've learned over the decade or so as they've been trying to do this carbon capture is the technology is not quite there yet. The market for the product that they produce is not quite there yet. It's very, very expensive. Here's a quote here. "We don't think carbon capture works as well as the industry and promoters claim," said David something Schnitzel, an analyst who wrote the report for the Institute of Energy Economics and Fiscal Analysis or Financial Analysis and international nonprofit agency. There's a couple more quotes here I just want to bring your attention to, Rob. Facility not running at full capacity for various reasons of technical and economic reasons. The Boundary Dam facility has not been run at full capacity, which has impacted overall volume of CO2 capture over the last 10 years. This does not mean the project hasn't been successful, but it does say that there is no market for the product. And a couple more quotes here for you, Rob. Carbon capture hasn't done what its proponents claimed it would do. And then other projects that are failing include one here in Alberta already by Edmonton. It's not running at capacity. Fundamentally, the economics just don't work, he told analysts in a conference call. Hopefully, the technology will improve and we can revisit this when the economics improve. And then this article closes with, "We may find out in 20 years that we didn't capture as much CO2 as we needed to, and we wasted a lot of money that could have been better spent." So right now, as it stands, Rob, this is not the technology that people hope it is. There's going to be a $20 billion, probably $50 billion when the government's done spending money, project and test. And one more thing that was in that article was on small scale, it might work, it might make sense, but not a large scale. And Pathway is for sure a large scale. So I don't think everybody's been paying attention to what happened in Saskatchewan and parts of Alberta already on carbon capture. It's not going to work the way they're thinking it is.
Look, Europe has gone down
Nick-
this whole green
that was
energy
my-
path. It's been an absolute disaster. It's cost an awful lot of money with absolutely zero impact. So, I mean, again, just like this MOU, carbon capture, this is Brookfield will be happy because I'm sure they'll get something out of this. And, as far as Imperial, Suncor, CNRL, Synovus, and then ConocoPhillips, I mean, those are your Pathways Alliance. They are the big players. This is going to destroy the small players in the oil and gas sector. It's going to force them to have to basically compete on a level that they do not have. And the government is going to offer incentives. They're going to offer subsidies to the Pathways Alliance. And I'm going, for them, they're looking at it going, this is great. Doesn't mean anything to them. It's an opportunity. But for all the little junior guys, all the small players, this is going to hurt. And I mean, that is a significant portion of the Alberta marketplace.
Yeah, and I was running through the numbers yesterday. You're talking, the estimate right now for the Pathway project is about $16.5 billion. About 60% of that will be provided through grants and subsidies and credits on the federal level. The other portion is going to be paid by the increase of the carbon tax by that Albertans are going to be paying at $130 a ton as per April 1st. The companies themselves, so the Pathways project, the initiative, the companies that you mentioned, are responsible for about 30 to 40% of the investment. Yet, as per the estimates that I've seen, they are looking at up to $2.5 billion in profit a year because taxpayers' money on both the Canada side and the Alberta side are flipping the tab. That's the reality of the Pathway project. You don't even need to talk about if it works or not. Literally, they're turning a profit because Canadians and Albertans are paying for it. Oh, of course. You think they say, when's the last time you heard the government say it's going to cost something? It doesn't cost twice as much, if not more. Like, come on, let's be realistic here.
Look, if it was profitable, industry would be doing it all on their own.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Let's
doing
be
it,
honest.
yeah.
I mean, you're all laughing,
Yeah.
you're all smiling because we know that's true. If it was profitable, we wouldn't need subsidies or incentives. They'd be doing it all by themselves. The fact that 60 to 65% of this is going to be funded by the taxpayer at a time when, again, we're supposed to be addressing affordability and to Jason's point, failed technology, unproven technology. This is ridiculous.
Completely true.
Carney
And
should
when
be
has the
ashamed of
government
himself.
Yeah, and it's
and when has the
interesting
government ever been on budget? So we know it's going to be closer to 50 when it's all said and done, and it'll be completely lost. I did have a video if you guys wanted to kind of leave on a lighter note, because the star who stole the show. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Rob, did you have Rob Ambrose? Did you want to finish your question?
Oh yeah, I was
because you
just
seemed.
say, I was just it wasn't even a question. It was just an add on to this conversation. Is that was kind of my expectation or my thought process too. I thought this was kind of a snake oil technology, which apparently it is, and it's so interesting because so much of the MOU really relies on that technology. There is a point that says it's predicated on completion of the first phase of the pathways before the pipeline even breaks ground, and that's obviously
Have to have an agreement by July 1st.
Canada Day.
And a carbon tax by April 1st.
Yeah.
Agreement on a carbon tax by April 1st. Don't forget that part, right?
Danielle Smith
And
should have
Nadine-
earned this in front of Carney.
Yeah.
That would have been funny. Nadine nailed it
Rob-
earlier in the episode, by the way, folks. This is not going to be an investor-friendly environment in Alberta.
No.
This whole MOU makes it very, very risky. I don't see a single investor popping up, let alone a consortium, saying, yeah, we'll take on this risk when we don't know how much the Indigenous people are going to take, how much is BC going to take, what are the carbon taxes on top of this, what's the cost per barrel by the time we get, is there going to be a ship to put it into when we get to the west? Like, I don't see anybody stepping up to invest in this, personally.
The estimate that I came up with yesterday was that it will cause Alberta oil to be 20 to 30% above the world's market. And they expect Alberta oil to lose about 10 to 15% ground if this goes through. And we're not talking about the 2030 numbers at 170 or more a ton. We're talking as we speak right now with April 1st.
Right.
So 130 a ton. They're estimating 20 to 30%. We cannot compete with the US. And we don't even have a pipeline yet. So there's no pipeline. There's no refineries in Canada to refine it. We still need to send that stuff to the US. And we can't compete with the US because they don't have any carbon capture bullshit. They don't believe in the carbon tax. They're not adding 39 cents a liter to our oil and gas before it even leaves the country. So I'm sorry, I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing because I cannot believe that the average Albertan is not pissed off by that, because they have the third largest reserve of oil in the world. It's insane.
Well,
insane.
it's just handcuffing.
Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
I just want to share a story. I remember where Linda Southern with ATCO was sharing with the Alberta caucus her lament about the shutdown of coal-fired energy, right? And Alberta's got a 1,000-year supply of coal. We got a lot of it. And the idea that was shut down to switch that all over to natural gas, and now, of course, with the Russian pipelines being down and all that type of stuff that's going on, and natural gas jumping in price, Albertans are paying a lot more for electricity now than they did with coal-fired plants. And this is all this stuff because of this environmental hand-wringing where they shut down these perfectly legitimate, decent industries like coal-fired electricity. And it's painful to see the repercussions of this stuff when those assets are bought up by other countries and taken overseas type of thing. We literally couldn't reinitiate that program the way that it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago type of thing. It's a shame that Canada and Alberta allows for the crippling of our industries like this. It's sad.
Was it considered clean coal, as Trump likes to call it? Was it coal,
coal
or just regular coal?
Beautiful,
it's great
coal.
It's great coal, but and you've got places like China that are firing these things up right, left, and center type of thing, and yet we are shooting ourselves in the foot by shutting down these things that were providing cheap, reliable efficient electricity in Canada. It's crazy. It's insane. It's insanity.
Yeah, we're shooting ourselves in the foot with a federally licensed handgun, so that's not good.
Well, show me one country
That's
yet
gonna be grabbed.
show me one country yet that has basically benefited from the government taking their guns.
Russia, China. Oh wait, benefited. Oh, sorry. I misunderstood the question, Nadine.
That was lost in translation.
Yeah.
But there was a star of the show that it showed up. Are you guys familiar with the most Albertan man in the world?
Yeah, yep. I saw the pictures. That dude looks like the most interesting man in the world. Just the Alberta version. Yeah, that's him. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a video there, Nico. So I'll just play this out because this might make you feel a little bit better about Alberta.
Is this real? That's a real guy?
The UCP
Well,
general meeting.
he's a real guy, but he's not really on the bison. That's just
Yeah.
He first gave an interview to Rebel
I figured that part, yeah.
He told them Alberta's independence was coming soon. He met with Mitch
Oh, nice.
Sylvester from the Alberta Prosperity Project, and Ottawa immediately got nervous. He shook hands with Chris Scott, met Ava Chipiuk and Danny Bulford, legends of the Freedom Convoy. Jason Lavigne interviewed him, and Alberta's independence movement gained 3 percentage points instantly. He discussed the new Constitution. Jeff Wilson. The hardest part was not overusing word freedom. He doesn't want to fix Canada. He wants to free Alberta. He is the most Albertan man in the world.
So there's a little hope there for Alberta. A little bit of hope there.
any final words from
So Nadine, did you get a
guys?
chance to meet him walking around the halls there?
No, I did not. I did see him a couple of times, but I was more concerned about catching people, talking to you and Mickey Amory. And
So
those
that
ones
guy's
mattered a
actually
little more
real?
to me.
I would have been great to have that one videotape. Yeah, that would have been great.
Hold on. That guy's actually real? I thought he was all AI. I thought it was all a big joke that he never existed. That dude actually exists for real?
No, yeah.
Not the
Very
bison
mysterious,
part,
I'll tell you
obviously,
that.
Rob. Not the bison part, but the actual human
Yeah,
being is
but,
actually real.
Any
Any
words?
words?
Very mysterious man.
Anything you guys want to close on?
One thing I thought was an interesting story is I remember years ago I attended a Tony Clement town hall in Ontario when I was first a Reform MP, and it was over the Taxpayer Expenditure Limitation Act. And I was shocked because everybody in that room was either of the opinion that, well, Tony, it's your job as our member of provincial parliament to tell us whether or not taxes should go up or down. And, if you give us this power, we trust you to make these decisions for us, etc. There was a deference to government. And I remember I and some other Alberta colleagues were attending because Tony had invited us. We were supportive of the Ontario Progressive Conservatives under Mike Harris. We were shocked by the way that his supporters were dealing with this issue, because in Alberta, it would have been a slam dunk. People would have said either A, overdue, great, or why didn't this happen 10 years ago? And that just shows you the difference between Alberta and the Ottawa area on these issues. And it explains what Nadine was talking about in terms of these well-informed grassroots Albertans who are just sick and tired of spin.
Nadine?
I think we've really highlighted the fact that Danielle is just continuing to play the political theater. She's riding the fence on these issues. There's a lot of promises, but the actions just don't back it up. And in this particular one, the MOU, really honestly, she should have took a match to it instead of signed it, because it is going to hurt Albertans. And that is the part that pains me the most, is there are Albertans out there right now that, food banks are, absolutely lineups because they cannot already afford, to put food on the table for their families. And the reality is this is just going to make matters so much worse. So I'm really, really disappointed with Danielle Smith on this, because if she was at all, any way, shape, or form, put Albertans first, she would never have signed this MOU.
Jason?
Well, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else in the world right now, I'll tell you that. Alberta is a place where they will take action if the leader isn't doing what they're doing or searching for a new base, as Kenny put it. they'll be replaced. This is not a place where we'll just wait for an election. We'll go ahead and take the action. I think she's kind of given herself till April 1st to convince Alberta that this is a good thing. If there isn't a snap election, I'll be surprised. I'm pretty sure things are kind of lining up where she almost has to call one now with the recalls on the table, with the referendum coming up. We might get an early election to whether or not we're going to see if we're going to move ahead with independence, or that issue gets voted down and then she has a new mandate and go ahead and run with the United Canada. But I think if she survives the spring as leader and we get to April 1st, I think Albertans might start looking at, or at least the UCP party might be looking for a new leader. So I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. I think we have some hope here left. It is running out. Christmas is coming, but it's going to come and go. And we're going to see in the spring exactly what Alberta is willing to put up with. The tolerance is running out, though. Danielle understood that when she was on my show. She said Albertans are angry and they're coming to their end. And I think it's coming faster than she may have hoped. That MOU didn't work the way I think she thought it would. She woke up this weekend and she definitely was a little taken aback by the response about independence. I know that for a fact. I was there when she was asked about it in private, and she was definitely taken aback by it.
Rob, Ambrose, anything you wanted to add?
No, I think we covered pretty much everything. Nico, if you wanted to do the your spiel there with the sponsor.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say that today's episode of the Political Orphans is brought to you by Gabble, the world's first live video debate on the market. If you feel like watching people debate, you can join and watch. But if you're like me and you like to debate people, show up, choose one of the questions, and debate someone. I gotta tell you, I absolutely love that platform. I was just talking to the owners just before the show. Love 2 young kids from Columbia University, 24 years old. And they're promoting what Charlie Kirk was doing. That was basically what they were trying to do, just to promote debate between people. And I learned today that I'm the old guy. I'm like 43 and I show up there. I'm debating 18, 25 years old. So I kind of got shot in the face on that one earlier that I'm the elder, not the old guy, the elder. Also, I want to thank Nadine, not for just being here today, but for introducing me to Bruce Party, because Mr. Party is going to be on the show on Wednesday. And I don't know if you guys are aware, but it looks like the Liberal Party has made a deal behind closed doors with the Bloc Québécois that they will be removing the religious protection that we have under the Criminal Code Section 319 in order to pass Bill C9. So Bill C9 will be amended to remove the section protecting religious speech and calling it hate speech, where we could face 2 years in jail. So on Wednesday, Mr. Party is going to be on the show to talk about C9 and obviously the C63 that Sean Fraser, our Minister of Justice, said would drop before the end of the year. So make sure to join us on Wednesday. Thanks again, Nadine. I've been trying to get this guy on the show for like a year and a half since I saw him on Jordan Peterson. So quite happy about that. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Bruce and I have become friends, and we're constantly sharing ideas and thoughts. And, we just need to get the message out to a much wider audience. And so, Nico, when you asked, I went, you know what? I think your audience is just thirsty for the knowledge and the information. And, I'm happy to help. That goes for any of you guys. Anytime you need an introduction, just if I can, I will.
Well, there you have it. So Jason introduced me to Nadine. Nadine introduced me to Bruce Party. So that's how it goes.
Yeah, that should be good. Should be a good show. I'm looking forward to that discussion. All right, guys, we are going to put a pin in her there. Thank you so much to Rob Anders, Nadine Wellwood, and Jason Lavigne for being on the show. It really, really interesting conversation. I learned a lot, especially as someone who's not really, too familiar with the ins and outs of Alberta politics. It was very informative to someone like me, and I think it was for our audience as well. Guys, if you are just tuning in and you want to support the show, if you like what Nico and I are trying to build here, please consider becoming a member. You can do that through YouTube for the low price of $2.99 a month. You can also buy us a tip, which is in, or buy us a coffee, which is in the top right. I'm not sure which one that is, but it's one of them. And other than that, folks, another way you can support shows, just keep coming back. Throw your comments in there. Well, obviously we didn't get to too many tonight just because we had a pretty full panel. But if you're a regular show watcher, you know that this show is heavily based on user engagement. So whether you agree with us, disagree with us, put the comments in there. We'll get to them. And other than that, folks, we will catch you tomorrow night. Same bat time, same bat channel. Peace.